Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cadet First Class Sherry Gramlich. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our NCLS session featuring Col Charles Fallon. Col Charles Fallon serves as the Commandant of the United States Air Force Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. In this role, he oversees 21 squadrons across 9 geographic locations. Each year, the Air Force Weapons School trains 300 expert instructors to integrate across all domains through graduate-level courses in 31 aircraft and weapon systems. These include Air Battle Manager, A-10 Thunderbolt II, AC-130 Gunship, B-1 Lancer, B-2 Spirit, B-52 Stratofortress, C-17 Globemaster, C-130 Hercules, CV-22 Osprey, EC-130H Compass Call, F-15C Eagle, F-15E Strike Eagle, F-16 Fighting Falcon, F-22A Raptor, F-35A Lightning II, Joint Terminal Attack Controller, HC-130J Combat King II, HH-60 Pavehawk, KC-135 Stratotanker, MC-130 Combat Shadow II, MQ-9 Reaper, RC-135 Rivet Joint, RQ-4 Global Hawk, U-2 Dragon Lady, U-28 Draco, Intelligence, Space, Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles, and Cyber. The Air Force Weapons School is also the sole publisher of Air Force Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures. Colonel Fallon graduated from the United States Air Force Academy in 2003 and is a command pilot with over 2,800 total flying hours, including 616 combat flight hours. Before his current assignment, Colonel Fallon served as the Chief of Strategy Integration Division at the Pentagon. He also commanded the 55th Fighter Wing at Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, and has held key leadership positions, including the F-16 Weapons School Air Combat Command and Director of Operations Senior Leader Management Chief. Please join me in welcoming Colonel Charles Fallon.
That was awesome. That was great. Thanks. All right, is this thing on? Y'all hear me? Thanks. All right, what a fantastic opportunity. Sherry, fantastic job. Thanks so much. She was really concerned about all those platforms she had to read, and since cadets aren't allowed to use acronyms, it gets a lot more difficult. So I don't even think I know what ICBM stands for. And also, Emma, you put your hand up. So Emma and Sherry have been escorting us for the past 2 days. I mean, for those of you that aren't, for cadets, it's an opportunity to escort a colonel for 2 days. For everyone else, you're like, not really looking to do that, but y'all did fantastic, and it's been really great getting to know you, so thanks so much for that. Also, thanks to the CCLD for hosting this fantastic event at NCLS, and specifically Melissa for having us and all the coordination to get us here, so that's great, and also to the Academy leadership team for having us. Okay, we should probably start from the beginning. If we go next slide. This is me. So we talked a little bit about the things that I do. Here's who I am. I was born in Boston, went to high school in St. Louis, went to the Air Force Academy after that, and since then I've been in the Air Force. Class 2003 is when I graduated. Those are the Air Force bases that I've served at, so quite a few PCSs. National War College and the Joint Staff in DC was the only time that I was anywhere for at least 3 years, so that was great. Good assignment. Wife, 3 kids, 3 young girls, 12, 11, and 6. So fantastic. And as you can probably tell, I hit the gym. Just kidding, whatever. Also, and then in the spare time that I don't have, I do some other hobbies, which is cool. All right, next. So here's what the weapons school looks like. So you heard, as difficult as Sherry had in pronouncing all the different platforms, what I told her was you should imagine then commanding squadron commanders who are in control of all those platforms, and that's a lot like herding cats. But 21 squadrons at 9 different locations. But those 21 squadrons, some of those squadrons have multiple platforms in them. So that ends up being 31 different weapons instructor courses, primarily for officers, building what you see on my left-hand shoulder is patch wearers. And then 12 of those are advanced instructor courses, primarily enlisted personnel, which is a recent add. About 300 graduates, about 700 permanent party personnel and cadre to execute that weapons school mission. So think your instructors that are there as those experts. All these platforms that you see up on the left, those reside at Nellis Air Force Base. So typically, as the Air Force Weapons School came to be and became something, it started off as the Fighter Weapons School. So it was a lot like what you think of in Top Gun, except the Air Force Weapons School doesn't have as much beach volleyball. So that's an unfortunate, but to make up for it, the weapons school is a lot more difficult. So it's a couple of months longer, about 6 months long per class. And unlike just being fighter-centric, fighter-only, it incorporates every platform that the Air Force operates, from intel analyst to air battle manager to intercontinental ballistic missile, missileers, and of course, all your fighter types as well, and everything in between. And the key is, much like we'll talk about for those few cadets that are sitting in the audience, is unlike maybe wars in the past and times in the past where certain people can argue about who's on the tip of the spear and who does what and who's the big dog and who's the support, going forward and probably for the past 10 years, it's been an all-hands fight. In any fight in the future, you look at wars versus the pacing challenge, are 100% an all-hands fight. And I need every single capability, I need layered capabilities in order to persevere and win in that challenge. And so all of these platforms, and I'll tell you what, to the man and woman at the weapons school, there's no, of course there's friendly rivalry on we're the best and we're more important, but everyone knows that if you go to war, you're gonna need every one of these platforms to make it happen. All the other platforms, it would be ideal if we had everyone at Nellis all at one location, but we just can't do that. Like, it doesn't make sense to bring 1 to 2 B2s and set them up at Nellis. So you let the B2s rest at B2 home in Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Same thing with some of the other platforms. So your high demand, low density assets, they stay in their main hubs. C-130s stay in Little Rock, C-17 stay up in Seattle, in Tacoma. And so the way the course works is at different times, those platforms that are your geographically separated units will come to Nellis and we'll all fight together, we'll all train together, and then you'll go back to your home station and learn from there. The coolest part about being the commandant is that I also get to fly all of these things. So with the exception of the B-1, because maintenance is tough, the A-10 and the F-22, which are single seat that I'm not qualified in, gotten a chance to fly and or operate all of the platforms that are up here. And that is not only a very humbling experience to be able to become a part of all of those communities, but to be able to see the different cultures in those communities that breed the best. And so that sort of insight is extremely useful to then look at platforms and try to develop game plans for how those platforms might integrate in future wars. All right, next. Okay. If I gave any one of you the task to build a tough training program for 6 months and said it's gonna have 31 different platforms, figure out how to do a training syllabus for it, you'd start off with this, right? We'd start off at the bottom, we'd do some core 1, bring you together, some leveling, here's what it means to become a weapons officer, here's what it means to go to the weapons school, do a week long of academics. Then I'm gonna kick you back out to that big part of the pyramid. That big part of the pyramid is where if you're an F-16 gal, you're gonna go back and become the best F-16 instructor pilot, the best F-16 pilot in the Air Force, and figure out your craft and become that platform individual expert. Then after you become that platform individual expert, we're gonna bring you back in together. You're gonna come back in together, get some baselining academics for how you are gonna start to work together as a team and integrate. Integration is a word that gets used quite often, and for many different reasons. I think probably the best way to think through integration is the synchronization and optimization of air power. So if I gave you a puzzle with a bunch of pieces, what's the best way that you can put that puzzle together and then give it back to me as it's oriented towards a tactical or operational objective. So it's just problem solving. Here's all the capabilities that you gave me. I put those up on a whiteboard. I have to go fight and solve this problem. How do I use these pieces based on their strengths and weaknesses? How do I put them together to then execute the mission? So, and then once we start talking about how we're gonna fight together, then we'll start a standard crawl, walk, run approach to fighting together. So I'm gonna do a couple weeks of not just F-16 only, but F-16 plus F-35 and maybe F-22. Or I'm gonna do B-52 plus F-22 and do some just basic integration. How do I work with other platforms? And then by the time you get to the top of the pyramid, which is WISNT, or the Weapons School Integration Phase, which is our 3-week capstone exercise at the end of every 6-month course, that's everyone. That's all of us. That's the entire 1.0 times Air Force fighting a tactical fight versus what the given threat is, typically oriented towards the People's Republic of China and or Russia for that. So that's what your typical syllabus looks like. About 25 missions in 6 months. Well, it doesn't seem like I'd be flying a lot or executing a lot of missions. 25, let's see, 100 plus training days. Like, man, what are your students doing the entire, well, you're gonna do those rides multiple times. You're not gonna do just 25 sorties. Fangs, you must have done like 150 missions, right? It was more than one a day, yeah. So the thing that's not necessarily on the slide is, how do you even become eligible to go to the weapons school? Well, how many cadets I got in here? Okay, so for you, about 7 to 8 years, let's say 6 to 8 years after graduation would be about the time that you'd be eligible to enter into the weapons school and apply for that. It's really about 4 years from when you get mission qualified in whatever your career field is. And that depends, right? So that's why you get to 7 to 8. If maybe the pilot training pipeline is backed up, then maybe it takes a little bit longer. If you're gonna be a cyber warrior, then maybe you can immediately, after tech school, get there within 6 months, you're mission ready, so then your clock hacks, and we're talking 4 years from now, and you could be eligible to apply. What you need to be is an instructor. So we'd spend a lot of time talking about, being the best pilot, being the best operator. And you do that, and in your career field, you're gonna do that for your first year. If you're a flyer, you're gonna be a wingman. And then you're gonna take another year and become a flight lead, learn how to not only execute your own tactics inside one aircraft, but how you can lead additional aircraft. And then, if you're good enough and ready for it, then we'll make you an instructor pilot. Instructor pilot, you're now teaching someone how to either be a flight lead or teaching someone how to be a brand new wingman. And then if you do that for about a year, and you're identified as one of the best, and you do a good job, and you want to, then you put your hand up and say, I want to go to weapons school, and you submit an application. Go through the application process. Your wing commander is going to, if they pick you as a number 1 or number 2, then you have a good likely chance of being selected at a selection board for that. And the last thing that doesn't get talked about, because we like to talk about everything's performance, but it's not just performance, it's also your reputation. Because trust is the most important thing, because what I'm doing when I put a patch on someone's shoulder is I'm putting out a signal to the entire Air Force that this is someone who's been trained as a tactical warrior, as a platform expert, and an integrator, and this person is someone that you can trust. You can trust to not only just be a good leader, but you can trust to bring someone home in combat. And so that trust, how do you build that? How do I build that reputation? For you cadets, it starts now. It's being known in your squadrons. It's being known amongst your friend group as someone who's dependable, as a good dude, as a good gal, someone that if I had problems and I needed something, I know that I could depend on you and you could get that done. And that, coupled with outstanding performance, are the type of things that'll get you selected into weapons school. All right, next. So during the weapons school integration phase, 3-week capstone. This is what one of our missions will look like versus the pacing challenge. I bring this up because this mission is almost exactly what future combat ops might look like, especially in the Pacific theater. So that little tiny black area up there, that's the Nevada Test and Training Range. That is the premier national treasure training range in the entire world. It's as good as it gets. Simulated threats, maybe even some really, really close to simulated type of surface-to-air threats, proximity to aggressor aircraft that can regenerate numerous times and complicate things. That is the laboratory that has trained our nation's warriors for over 50 years. And so it is fantastic. It doesn't get any better than that. Think about it. It's right in the heart, right in a triangle of LA Center, Oakland Center, Salt Lake Center, right next to Las Vegas, and that's where the national treasure is. So if you want to know like what your nation thinks is important, the US has said, nope, you're not touching this airspace. Sorry, FAA. Airliners can go around, you can burn an extra couple million a year, and sorry. But the future war, we need to use airspaces that are this big, and they don't exist over land. This airspace, the W291, Whiskey 291, it's about 550 miles wide. About 550 miles long, about 250 miles wide. If you took the Nevada Test and Training Range, once again, our jewel, acknowledged national treasure, tilted that 90 degrees, you could fit about 4 of those into that airspace. And when I'm talking about fighting, we're talking about what you might fight one day against the pacing challenge. Like 150 miles wide in the Nevada Test and Training Range doesn't even begin to, because China is touching you at hundreds of miles, not at 70 miles, at 80 miles. And so ranges matter. And when distances start to increase that much, it's not just, oh, well, I can take my tactics and multiply them by 2 and we'll still be safe. It's the same thing, it's just a longer missile. It doesn't work like that. Because when you're talking thousands of miles and hundreds of miles, now my planes have to travel hundreds of miles. And my support assets, and your combat support assets, aero refueling platforms, need to be hundreds of miles further away. And my air battle managers need to be hundreds of miles away. And they can only talk hundreds of miles, and so now I can't talk to them, and we can't get the information passed. And so the tyranny of distance is real. And so what your typical war in the Pacific, the tactical mission that, heaven forbid, something like that happen, what you 3 would have to do is to find, fix, track, target, engage, and assess kills on boats. That's it. You're going to find enemy destroyers out there in the air, out there in the sea space. We're going to find them and we're going to kill them. And you're going to have to do that from hundreds of miles away. And you're going to have to do that then from thousands of miles away from bases where you land, which then means you're doing 12-plus hour sorties, which then means you're putting that much more hours on jets. And the places where you're going to land may or may not be blown up when you get back there. So you're going to have to land and go somewhere else and take more gas. It becomes a complicated problem when you're talking about the Pacific. So find and kill those red enemy destroyers out there. You're going to be supported by the U.S. Navy. So in these exercises, we'll have U.S. Navy support out of the coast of San Diego, simulating both blue and red destroyers. So we got some on the good side. Most of them we'll put on the bad side. And then down here to the southwest, we're going to load it up with everything America's got. And so your typical sequencing of an attack as you're executing there is you're going to put your 5th generation stealth fighters out front with tucked in close behind would be your 4th generation fighters doing fighter integration tactics between the two to conduct a fighter sweep of enemy aircraft out of the airspace. So any enemy aircraft, because guess what? Those enemy aircraft probably aren't there to kill fighter pilots either. What are those enemy aircraft there to kill? They're going to kill your tankers, because that's how you strangle America's warfighting capability. is you kill their tankers, you make their AWACS and communication platforms push far enough away, you start killing all the resupply. That's how you win wars. Logistics is how you win wars. It's not flashy fighter pilots, as much as I'd like to think it is, it's not. And so you're gonna have that wave of fighter sweep through there, and then immediately after that, you're gonna roll in with whatever strike platforms you have, primarily conducting standoff weapons, employments of standoff weapons, cruise missiles out of bombers. And so fighters are doing that, shooting cruise missiles, trying to sink boats, and then everyone's trying to get home alive, and everyone's landing very low on gas because we're driving thousands of miles. So that's what the tactical warfight is. These are the missions that we execute together with 80 aircraft. So 80 blue aircraft who are actual, shooters or part of the package push, plus about 15 to 20 aerial tankers. It's an incredible amount of resource. There were times that I've flown in combat in CENTCOM theater, and there were 4 tankers airborne throughout the entire AOR, like over the course of 24 hours. We're talking about I need 15 of them over the course of 4 hours to do this thing. It's a lot. It's a lot of support. That's why I say it's an every person fight. There used to be a saying a couple years ago that that'll just be a 5th generation fight. That's just stealth. No, it's everyone. And we didn't even begin to talk about the layered capabilities of space and cyber that are needed and are a requirement to even push those fighters across that airspace in order to just mitigate all of our risk and get that done. So it's a massive problem. It gets really complex, but we're gonna talk about how it's okay. And some of the answers are simple. We just don't like them and we're not comfortable with them. And so it's important, especially for you cadets, to think about it because this is gonna be your future. Your future is gonna be less like 20 years of global war on terror like my career was. Like when I was as a 3 degree, sitting in a graded review for management, just trying to pass, just trying to get by. And all of a sudden, someone broke in the room and said, oh my gosh, the Twin Towers just fell. And how that changed the trajectory for the next 20 plus years of my career. That could be like you, except it's not gonna end up in a low intensity conflict in an isolated region trying to rid the world of terrorism. It could be a war on the grand scale that we haven't seen since World War II. That's something that we all need to think about and acknowledge that your generation are gonna be the ones who are gonna carry that burden. It's probably not gonna be me. But for every little bit that all of us that you see in active duty, we're all committed to make sure that we create the playgrounds and we create the laboratories that you need to get the training required for you to be successful in that endeavor. I'm 100% committed to that. So, but make no mistake, it's gonna be you that does it, and you're gonna have to bear that burden. Next, please. So this is it. This is what it looks like. I remember being a cadet, sitting in Arnold Hall during NCLS, maybe, I don't remember if it was NCLS or not, listening to Vietnam prisoners of war talk about their experiences, listening to Vietnam pilots, because a lot of our general officers were Vietnam pilots, talk about their experiences in combat. And of course, you're young, you want to hear stories on combat, you're like, man, that's awesome, I wish we had something like that, even though that's stupid to say you never want to experience stuff like that. But thinking about what that was like, and I'll just tell you, and no offense to anyone, if something kicks off in the future in the Pacific, it's gonna make Vietnam, it's gonna make the global war on terror look like a kindergarten play. It's gonna look like this. It's gonna look like World War II. And so maybe you could talk to my grandfather who's not alive, but that would be it. That would be the person who could tell us best on how to prepare for this and what it feels like and what it looks like. But the things that I see up here, no American serviceman or woman has seen or even heard or even been trained by someone who's done something like this. And our military has been optimized over the years to not do something like this. And so that's why your generation, and we're gonna help, needs to think about organized training and equipping for this, not for what we're doing now. There's a unique part about the Air Force and why I think it's even more important. And for the cadets, this will seem new potentially for those that have served in other services or served in the Air Force, maybe not. But the Air Force culture is very unique in many ways. But in one of the ways is that you will be the ones doing the fighting. If I went to West Point and graduated, after my company command, which would probably be my second year of being a captain, when I was done with company command, I'm off the battlefield. I'm gonna work in staffs, I'm gonna work for generals, I'm gonna work for colonels, and I'm gonna do staff work, but I'm off the battlefield. I've done my thing. And they've paid their service, because that's no picnic. But you, until you're a lieutenant colonel, and maybe even a colonel if you're lucky, you will be executing the mission. So I hope this doesn't happen for 20 plus years, otherwise it's going to be you. And you'll be expected to lead. And this other aspect of this, if we're gonna say it's like World War II, then let's use a reference that a lot of us, and even a lot of the cadets will recognize, like, have you seen Saving Private Ryan? Okay. Remember when that door goes down, opening scene, Omaha Beach? German machine gun is aimed right at that when that door opens up. Well, it doesn't matter much if you're my young wingman and you just got there and you trained or whatever, and I've been flying for 20 plus years and I know everything and I'm super skilled. When that door drops and that machine gun goes off, it either hits me or it hits you or it hits neither of us or it hit both of us. And that's the way some of our technical parity is starting to play out in that future endeavor against some Chinese capabilities. And so, things that have held true in the past for 20 years, if I just train people really well, if I get them very experienced to understand things and they're experienced, think of red flag. So red flag exercise that we have. For 70 years, it's kept our Air Force safe because it has trained Blue 4 to survive their first 10 combat missions. Well, it doesn't really matter who China decides they're gonna shoot and target with their missile. It could be someone with 3,000 hours or it could be someone who's brand new. Those are things that we haven't thought about before and haven't organized, trained, and equipped to deal with that or deal with what it looks like to replenish combat losses halfway through an environment. And so these are things that we're starting to get after and think about in the weapons school. If I told you you had to do this at some point in your career, and I think a way that you can help us help you, and we're continuing to ask the same questions, but if this was to happen sometime, every decision that you make, you should look at under that lens and say, well, if I was going to do this 5 years from now, is what I am doing now important? Is that going to help or hurt or be a neutral decision to that? And are the things that I'm upset about and complain about and think need to change, would they matter or not matter? And do the things that matter and do the things that will help you be successful. We're gonna talk about some things that I think will help you be successful. There's a couple things specifically at the Air Force Academy that if some boomer, they gave me the stage, so I'm gonna tell you. It's just my opinion though. After 20 years, there are two things that the Air Force Academy has always done for its graduates. Because when I listened to those prisoners of war when I was a cadet, they said there's numerous things, but it was almost a resounding two things that resonated with every prisoner of war. Is number one, their own personal faith got them through, and the second one was a tough fourth class year at the Air Force Academy. Those two things. It doesn't necessarily need to be the fourth class year, but it's a tough experience. It's an experience. Why are tough experiences good? That's right. It builds resilience, right? It proves that you can do it. And if you get to do those tough experiences with multiple people, then guess what? That builds unity. We can do all this together. So that when you're faced with a tough challenge in the future, you're like, I got this. Or, well, that's pretty scary, but I've done stuff in the past. I got a little bit of confidence, right? Those are the two things. And so let's hammer home some of that stuff, and let's talk about some leadership. Where I really want to talk about is what you need to do to be prepared to lead in this Air Force going forward. Next. Okay, so this is it. So if you just write this down, you're immediately cadets, you cleared off for the weekend. So this is what we're going to talk about. This is kind of an overview on that. The what, the how, and the whys. We're going to spend some time on the how, because what I want to convey is what it feels like. I'm you in 20 years. So I hope you like what you're looking at, because this is what it's going to look and feel like. But I want to explain some of the experience that I've had and what 20 years of service feels like, and it's awesome, and it's an amazing thing. Next. Okay, how do you do this? How do you win future wars? How do you lead future wars? How would you lead in combat? It's really easy. Do the task that you have at hand. Execute the mission. Kill 10-meter targets. When you're done killing 10-meter targets, then think about killing 20-meter targets. We spend so much time in life worrying about 80-meter targets when you got things that are 10 meters off your nose, okay? So kill 10-meter targets until you're out of missiles, and then either request more missiles, or then you can start adjusting fire along. So it's super easy. It's really easy. And then I'll tell you what, leadership is T-ball. Leadership positions that you're going to get thrust into, you got to do something. But more often than not, you could actually just hurt it more than, and so, like, it is T-ball. It is set up. Your relationships with people for you as an officer, between officer and enlisted, it is set up for you to be a hero, for you to be the leader that they want you to be. All you can ever do is really prove them wrong. So prove them right. Treat people with respect. Like, it's super easy. Your airmen that you're gonna lead, 99% of them are just the most fantastic human beings. And in the Air Force in particular, they're gonna be the best of the best enlisted force that anyone has ever led. And so treat them with respect. That's all you gotta do. Super easy, right? Golden rule, got it. All right, next. So these are specifically the Air Force Weapons School values. Humble, approachable, credible. They could and should be just general values for humans, for how to be a successful, decent human being. They should definitely be part of any sort of values for individual leadership, like 100%. So humble. What does that mean? I mean, humble these days oftentimes means like self-deprecating. I'm gonna stand up here and tell you how I don't know anything, and well, that's not gonna work. You think airmen are gonna wanna follow that? No. Are airmen gonna wanna follow the person that says, I went to the Air Force Academy, I know everything, I'm a second lieutenant? No. Okay, so somewhere in between those two, right? So we've defined the bounds. Okay, so for humble, what I think is confident. You're confident in what you know, and you're confident in who you are, and you're confident in the experiences and the training that you've received. But I'm willing to learn something new every single day. No matter who tells me it, I'm willing to accept and think and ponder and consider something that someone tells me, no matter who they are. Approachable. Like, I want to be a leader that someone brings bad news to. And if I ever find myself that my front office team that I have here trying to hide things from me, I'm doing something wrong. Like, when things are going wrong or people are struggling in silence about things, I need to know about that immediately because I can fix that. And so you need to conduct yourself as a human being so that people bring you that bad news. You're not ripping people's heads off at all times. And lastly, that credibility. Whatever my craft is, whatever my AFSC is, it's gonna be the best job in the world. Doesn't matter what you fly, what you do in the Air Force, you have the best job in the Air Force, I guarantee you. And so learn and become an expert in that craft. Learn everything about it. I don't care if you're at the MPF in finance or flying fighters, learn your job, be the best at it, and you'll be a fantastic human being because that's who we need on our team to fight. And if you do that, that's gonna help you be credible, or that's gonna help you be humble. Because when you're comfortable with yourself and what you know, and you're like, I know everything, I know all the stuff, I know things, then when I come to you and tell you, hey, did you consider this? You don't feel so off-put by it. Even though it's a young airman giving me advice, I go, huh, that's interesting, I never considered that. That's actually a pretty good idea. Because I'm not threatened. I know what I know. That's it. Humble, approachable, credible. So that man, Rag Seltzer, unfortunately recently died last fall. He and I served together for numerous assignments. We were weapons instructors together in the F-16 division for 3 years. That's the best example of humble, approachable, credible. No more to really talk about, but probably everyone just needs to see that picture. Next. All right, sacrifice and serve. So I flew F-16s for 18 years. This gentleman up front taught me how to fly F-35s a couple years ago. When I first went to Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, I went to the fighter training unit to learn how to fly F-16s. So it meant I'd already gone to pilot training, I'd already gone to IFF. And so, of course, like everyone who's in their 20s who's on that track to fighters, I knew everything, right? And I was a lot like, I don't know if any of you have seen Talladega Nights, but I was that young Ricky Bobby, like the young 8-year-old who's like, I want to go fast, I want to go fast. And that's what every single person is like at that point. I want to go fast. I finally got here. I'm done with this training pipeline. I'm going to fly a fighter. Like, give me that fighter. And what does every Air Force training pipeline look like? It's like, welcome to day 1, 3 weeks of ground school. And you're like, oh, I just want to fly an F-16. Please let me do the thing. This gentleman up here, Trojan Gilbert, he was one of the first academic instructors that taught us how to fly the F-16. And he did exactly what he was supposed to be. He's like, oh, got it. You guys want to go fast. You want to go fly jets. You want to go touch the jet and go do things. Let's talk about ground ops for a little bit. Let's talk about your electrical system. Let's work through how to just get in and out of the jet and strap in and the basics. He didn't shoot us down and say, you know, and kind of curb our enthusiasm, but he let us focus in on what was important. Because at that stage, all I wanted to do was go fast, but I wasn't ready to go fast. And he let me learn the basics. And he was my first example of what I consider a fantastic instructor that taught the basics on how to do things. And did so in a way, and it wasn't just, let me teach you how to fly an F-16 or strap into an F-16. I'm going to teach you how to be a fighter pilot. Up until that point, up until you see it and spend time around it, a lot of people are going to think they know what a fighter pilot is. And he taught us that it's not about the peacocking and the false bravado and walking into the O Club and acting like you own everything and yelling at people. That's not being a fighter pilot. Being a fighter pilot is about tough, grit, determination, being confident, learning, being an expert, and most importantly, character. So I'll never forget Trojan for that. And I remember distinctly on graduation night, shaking his hand, him saying something nice, and just thinking like, I hope I'm going to be just like him one day. That's it. Just want to be an instructor just like Trojan. Next. So after Luke, I get to Kunsan Air Base. That's my first operational assignment. I'm done with, finally, I'm out of AATC training, and I'm gonna go do the mission. I need to become a mission-ready pilot. So I wanna go fast again, right? And so, but guess what? Once more, you get into one more upgrade training. So you're out of the pipeline, but man, there's more training. The Air Force always has more training for you. So you go through one more thing of training, about maybe 3 to 6 months to become a mission-ready pilot. I'll never forget walking back in from that check ride, and my squadron commander, Jethro, who is a Gulf War I vet, looks at me, shook my hand, said, congratulations on being the newest CAF wingman. I was like, that's pretty cool. Probably so, maybe not. Maybe there's someone on the other side of the world who's getting certified at the exact same time. But I was like, finally, did it. I'm there. And then I remember walking back in, and we walked back into the building, and for those of you that have or haven't been in a fighter squadron, while flying operations are going on, fighter squadrons can be a little hectic, a little frenetic. There's chatter all the time, there's probably rock music playing, and people are bouncing all over the place, yelling, having a good time, and focused on these aircraft that are flying and crews that are coming back. And I walked back in and it was silent. I'm like, huh, that's super weird. Like, what is going on? Oh, okay, whatever. I'm like, hey, look at me. I'm the CAF's newest wingman. So I go and undress, get ready, and walk back in. And as I walk into the bar, everyone's circled around the bar. And they say, Vice, have you heard the news? I'm like, no, man, what's up? And said, hey, Trojan died. So what I didn't know at the time, because you're a student, you're in the B course, you're focused about you, right? All I care about is me and my training, and that's all I'm focused on. But Trojan, who was an instructor who wasn't in a combat unit, had no need to deploy, volunteered to deploy because he wanted to go serve his country. He had missed out on some deployments, and he wanted to go fight the war. And so he deployed to Iraq. And while he was out there in Iraq, flying with his wingmen, doing a close air support mission, they executed yo-yo ops. So yo-yo ops, during close air support, I need to maintain over top of friendlies to protect them the whole time, right? And I'm gonna kill bad guys that start attacking friendlies. Well, eventually, for like an F-16, I've got about 45 minutes that I can remain overhead before I run out of gas. And then it's gonna take about 45 minutes to an hour before I can get back with gas so that I can fight for another 45 minutes. That's just how math works. Well, I need to be there the whole time. I can't just be gone 45 minutes because otherwise friendlies are gonna get attacked and I won't be ready. So we do yo-yo ops. I'm gonna, at the 20-minute mark, send my wingman to the tanker. By the time he comes back, it's 20 minutes later, then I go to the tanker. We've got someone overhead the whole time. Well, while Trojan kicked his wingman off to the tanker, immediately troops went in contact. And troops just north of Baghdad, they needed them, and they needed them bad, and they were getting overrun, and it was nasty, and it was really bad. And so Trojan immediately said, yep, copy that, I'm in. I'll be in strafe in 30 seconds. And he rolled in doing a medium altitude strafe attack and did numerous strafe passes and couldn't identify the target. It was a really hard target, sometimes moving, sometimes hiding behind buildings. You know, when you're shooting the gun in an urban environment, someone could just be shielded by the building. And now, I need to actually attack from this direction, and it's gonna take another 2 minutes for me to get around to the other side and attack. So he's having trouble with it. So what Trojan said was, okay, absolutely. I'm gonna go down to low altitude and do a low angle strafe pass. And at the time, the F-16 did not have low angle strafe combat numbers, so that was not a standardized attack. But Trojan said, dude, we got this. Need to get the mission done. And as he was conducting that strafe pass and opened up the gun, the thing that he didn't do was recover enough in time. And he hit the ground. And it was ugly and it was terrible. And that was the end of Trojan. And so if any of you end up at Luke Air Force Base, there's a bridge that goes across Litchfield Park Boulevard, and that bridge is named after Trojan. It's a fantastic, and these are the type of human beings that are gonna teach you. These are the human beings that are gonna be your mentors when you get out into the Air Force. Absolute rock stars. So, let people know you care. These are the human beings that I was closest to that are no longer with us after 22 years of service. Adriana Vorderbruggen, she was my 3 degree when I was a 4 degree. She trained the crap out of me. She ended up being I'll just talk about it. She was the type of 3 degree supervisor that I absolutely dread. Couldn't have been nicer. High standards. Didn't yell. Would just go, Cadet Fallon, you're not meeting standards. You're like, I'd rather you just yelled at me and we went along our business. But nope, she was gonna hold you to that standard and you were gonna have to make that bed the way she wanted that bed to be made. But super nice, never yelled, never raised her voice until recognition. Then you found out that this woman could do 170 push-ups and you were at about 15 on recognition and was an absolute animal. Well, Adriana in the early 2000s was deployed to Afghanistan as an OSI agent working outside the wire, and she got killed in a roadside attack. Let people know that you care, because you might not get a chance to say, hey, you were a fantastic 3 degree when I was a 4 degree. Thanks for the opportunity that you gave me. Thanks for all that knowledge and that example that you led, because I've been able to do that my entire life, and I learned from you. So that bro that you got sitting next to you, I'm not saying that we should be writing letters and telling each other how much we love or you love them. That's weird, like not suggesting that. But don't be afraid at some point to tell the people that you're closest to here that they matter. Especially in light of that slide, reference our World War II and what war might look like. All you need to do to see what real might looks like is look up like the West Point class of 1917 and see the years of which they all deceased. And it was about 6 months later in 1918. Like, that's what war could look like for you guys, knowing that the Air Force officers fight the wars. Okay, slide. It's not all sob stories. It's not. You're going to get the opportunities to do things. Think about what you want to do now. Think about your whys, because your whys right now for why you joined, why you came to the Air Force Academy, they're going to be the same why for why you continue on in the Air Force. Stay beyond your commitments, serve for 20 plus years. All of those things are exactly the same. You're also going to get fantastic opportunities, like to be a squadron commander. As a squadron commander, you're going to get to lead some of the most amazing people in combat, officer, enlisted. See some bad parts, but you're going to see so much better in the good times. One quick anecdote that I'll throw on that is I'll never forget, as a squadron commander, a couple weeks prior to deploying, seeing a young A1C who had recently PCS'd into Shaw Air Force Base. And she was a little skittish. We were about 2 months out from leaving, and just wasn't her same. Like normal, outgoing girl, and just wasn't the same. I said, "Hey, Abby, what's going on? How you doing?" And just kind of talked to her about some things. "Oh, I'm fine, sir. Yeah, good to go." "Okay, like what's going on, Abby? Like we talk all the time. What's going on?" So that's a rule. Like number one as a leader, you got to talk to people. You got to talk to them about everything. And if you think something's off, continue to pry and act so you can get down to that truth. It's like, "Okay, sir, like I'm just a little nervous about going to combat." "Okay, well, let's talk about it. Like, what are you nervous about? You nervous about dying? You nervous about unforeseen things?" Like, "No, just kind of nervous about these things." "Okay, well, here's what you're gonna do. Go home, write down all the things that you're concerned about and that you're anxious about. Put them all on a piece of paper. Come to me tomorrow, and we'll sit down and we'll set up a plan for how we're gonna address and talk to all those." And we did. And she was good at that and able to deploy. Rolex about 3 months into that deployment, and you get the call that you as a commander never want to get in the entire world, and it's, "Hey boss," because you're asleep, racked out. "Hey boss, we lost a jet. I'll be there in like 5 seconds." And as I go in and walk in the front door, my first question is, where is my airman that's supposed to be sitting at the duty desk answering these messages? The officer who was on duty at that time goes, "Sir, I have no idea where she was. I haven't seen her. I was off in the bathroom when this happened. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'll get you an answer." We couldn't find Abby. Where is Abby? Well, it turns out that Abby heard what happened, and she got in a car. Like a little 19-year-old girl got into a car without anyone else telling her what to do, just a young airman, took a mobile walkie-talkie with her, and drove out to the flight line to try to find that jet and try to figure out exactly, because there wasn't great communication on who had or hadn't gone off the end of the runway, and in the middle of a monsoon in the desert, drove out there to try to find someone. Like, that's an amazing thing and an amazing feat for a human being. And to be able to then come back and go full circle, and when you as the squadron commander get to hear while you're at the receiving line when everyone gets back from the deployment, and Abby and her mom come up to you, and her mom looks at you and says, "Thanks for bringing my girl home safe." Man, I mean, that's going to recharge your bats for the next 20 years. And so it's experiences like that you're going to see and you're going to feel that are going to make you go, "Oh, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life," because that is just awesome. And it's addictive, and it's fantastic to be around people like you. Okay, slide. Your whys change. When you're a cadet, the Air Force doesn't issue you a family, but you're going to get a family at some point. And so while you're game planning out what your future looks like, where you're going to be a fighter pilot and you're going to do all the things, realize that you're probably at some point, these people are going to be with you. And the reason why I continue to serve today is not only to protect them, but I continue to serve to make an Air Force that's fantastic, that's the Air Force that we need so that you can lead these 3 girls someday. And leaving with that, I'll just end it with one last thing, and that's the training that you've received here. It doesn't always feel like it. It doesn't look like on paper it directly translates. But the peer leadership and the actual challenges and the challenging environments that you receive here at the Air Force Academy, 100% will be the determiner in our nation's success. So thanks so much. That's all I have. We'll open it up to some questions and answers. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Colonel Fallon. At this time, I would like to open the floor for questions. Attendees can ask questions at the microphones positioned in the audience.
Otherwise, we're just going to start with cadets on the spot.
Major Alcott, Air Force Auxiliary, also Air National Guard. Just a quick question about, earlier you said about 4 years after qualifying, potentially having the opportunity to apply for weapons school. Say you qualify in one aircraft, then you switch to another aircraft. Do you go back to weapons school for a different airframe certification?
No, typically not. And typically it just, most of those, like there's a back end on that window to where if you've had too many years of service already, then you wouldn't be eligible to come back through the weapons school. And so that's usually what catches most people. And to just be honest, you wouldn't want to come back through weapons school again. One time is enough. That's like saying I want to come back through the Air Force Academy. Like, I'm good. Like, we're good.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Sir.
Bill Eckert, class of 68. Something folks often don't hear about, but now that I've lived a third of the entire history of the United States since the Constitution was ratified, which is true, one of the things I've seen is that when this country deploys to war, you don't read about it much in the paper, but one of the first things we do is fire general officers who have a great golf handicap, but stopped learning after doing a flight of 4 as a captain. In the fighter weapons school, since you all are learning so much together, is there feedback upward to help the general officers in this Air Force adjust how they lead it?
Yes, sir. That's a fantastic question and thought. I'll address the question directly, but indirectly, I do that by building the future leaders. And really, this place does it by building those future leaders so that we don't run into those problems. And so that's the first thing that I do, is make sure that we build the right minds that are humble, approachable, and credible, who are critical thinkers, are thinking outside the box, thinking outside of just their own platform, thinking towards capabilities that our Air Force needs to be successful. And so that's where we stay in the wheelhouse on that. I think also to another extent, the Air Force Weapons School, much like the Air Force Academy, remains as it's a light on the hill for the Air Force. And so that's a way that we try to directly influence either decisions or certain leadership characteristics through that. And I'll tell you what, it can be very successful on that. But as far as direct influence, when your weapons officers that you train end up back out in the field, connected and they're touch points of those senior leaders, that's where I think that influence really starts. Sir. Yeah. All you.
Hi, sir. C1C Kieran Moyes from Squadron 32. I came to the academy initially wanting to be a pilot, but I've had a bit of a mindset shift, and I'm going to be commissioning as a developmental engineer.
Nice.
So what can you say as a lesson you think I should take away as someone who's not going rated?
Yeah.
How can I use these values and become an expert in a field that's not rated?
I think, outside of the discussion about maybe the weapons school and some of my just baggage as a fighter pilot and talking about things, everything that I said is applicable to you. Like, how do you treat people? How are you gonna lead? I don't care if it's a small team, I don't care if it's a bunch of civilians. Like, the way that you talk and treat people and carry yourself with humility, approachability, and credibility is the same. Those are universal truths. The thing from this speech that I think is probably just the framing of what your service is going to look like over the next 20 years and how that's going to fit, how that fits into our national strategy, how that fits into what the threats will be over the next 20 years, should then 100% inform how you as a developmental engineer. And I'll really challenge you to stay connected to your classmates who are maybe on the front lines. So in that connection will help inform you and your decisions, because you're shaping our future. And we need to make sure that we are lashed up and synchronized so that one hand's talking to the next. And so the things that you do are just as important, if not more. You are going to be designing the actual force that we actually fight. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm C1C Brock Miller. Of the three, humble, approachable, credible, which do you feel is the most uncommon and hardest to instill in the people?
True credibility. Because I do think that true credibility is what breeds the actual humility that we need. And so I think it's very easy. It's very easy for me as a colonel to just walk in and say, hey, Fangs, I'm flying an F-35. Like, don't care. Oh, cool feedback. But instead, he's able to look at me and say, hey, Vice, you screwed this up. You screwed that up. You need to get better, man. Like, it's not going to work out for you. And me go. And so it takes that level of commitment to try to be as credible as possible. And there are a lot of, there are always going to be shortcuts that you can take, and those shortcuts are always going to fire back at you and come back at you like a boomerang. And so don't take any shortcuts, but it's being truly credible, truly knowing what you're saying beyond just buzzwords and pretty sayings and all of that. So spend your time in the books. You bet, thanks. Sir.
Chadzy, former top commander.
What's up?
Talk about it, 'cause that's what I do. So one of the challenges that we always found as we were running our syllabus was striking the balance between the weapons school's historical charge of building tactical experts in your combat specialty, and then the modern kind of demand and requirement to build operational integrators.
Right.
In 6 months seems like forever in a syllabus, especially when you're going through it as a WUG. But when you're trying to run all the things that we need to generate in our weapons officers in this modern era to prep them for combat like you expect, it's not enough time. So I guess the question is, how do you guys find that you're continuing to strike that balance, and how do you see that balance evolving as we try to find kind of that right approach?
Right. The weapons school is unique in that it identifies the talent and then trains the talent. The assumption is that we train the talent the best, but that's not always necessarily true. But we've still identified the best. And so, to answer your question deliberately, there is very little deliberate, because the syllabus hasn't changed that much since you were there. There's not a lot of deliberate development of integrators. It happens by happenstance. This student ends up being the MPC chief here. They end up going to this Wizenvol and they're leading. They do this or that, but that's kind of just shots in the dark from the scheduling board. And so things that we're doing now, because I think what you're describing is the tension that's always between creating tactical experts versus integrators, which is also another tension between, do I create generic problem solvers and critical thinkers, or do I create people that can go fight China and Russia? And so those tensions are always alive and well. The one thing that we can never do, because it goes to the discussion that we just had here, is especially at times now, based on experience levels, degradation of flying hours, we can never give up the tactical credibility piece. I have to build fantastic A-10 CAS pilots. I have to build the best. If I don't do that, then we're in the hurt locker. what we need to do is, in the weapons school is actually kicking off this summer, an operational planning team to look at what our syllabus might look like in the future, to include potentially not running 2 classes a year, but maybe 1 class a year. And those sort of things are contentious. They all come with drawbacks, but that may be what's required in the future. So, that guy, thanks, you bet. Good seeing you. Hey, sir.
Colonel Fallon, it's great to hear your talk. Thank you so much for being so open and transparent about your experiences and both with the good and the bad. I'm Joe Roberts, class of '68. We fought in Vietnam back in the day when, of course, as you said, there's a different kind of war than it is now. I've been reading about and was inspired by the role that the Air Force played when Iran launched those missiles and things to try to wipe out Israel. Have you been informed by the way that our Air Force supported that? And were some of those tactics actually things that you had already developed at weapons school?
They were, not at scale though. And so that's what makes that event just so fantastic. But the human beings that conducted that attack were trained at the Air Force Weapons School. And so I think that's also the other layer which we could talk hours over, is not only what the future war may portend, but what is then the likely state as I build up, organize, train, and equip to have to maybe do something, hopefully not, but I know I'm gonna continue to do this stuff in theater. And how do I build a force and train humans to do both and not spend $750 trillion trying to do it? Like these are tough challenges that we're trying to face, right? And so, but yes, 100% that it was actually only about 6 months prior to that event kicking off that people in that Strike Eagle community decided, hey, we need to do some training on this. And we're gonna pay out of our own pocketbook, not with Air Force money, but we'll use Air Force money, but it's Air Force money that was supposed to do something else. We won't buy toilet paper and paper towels for the squadron. We're gonna spend that money to get some drones overhead our base so we can practice some of those intercepts. And God bless them for doing that. Yes, sir. Thanks, sir.
We have time for one more question.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is C1C of Nishram Bodker. I'm from CSO6. You mentioned that the 30-meter view, or at least like we should look out for the 30-meter view, which is kind of like 6 to 8 years for the weapons school, but our 10-meter view for most of us in this room is pilot training. Mm-hmm. What is one like attitude or like mental mindset, like quote or something you live by that we should follow going into pilot training in the next couple of years?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really good. I talked to some cadets about this the other night. I think it's a lot like leading as a second lieutenant. Remember when I talked about T-ball? Okay. If I wanted to see you not do well, or if, this is, the British military uses a very interesting problem-solving methodology, which is you create and come up with a plan. And the way that I red team that is I say, this plan is going to fail. And then I actually come up with all the ways that this plan will fail. This plan will fail because of this, and then this will happen. And so run that red team on pilot training. And number one is probably that humble, approachable, credible. I show up, I went to the Air Force Academy, I was a glider IP, I understand all the things, like, I'm just here. Like, where are my wings? I'm here to do that, right? Okay, so we can get that off, like, you're not gonna do that, right? Okay. But more so than just that kind of first layer, which rarely anyone's gonna be like, although it's definitely possible, would be, how do you actually feel like that? It's that I showed up and you're confident in the things that you know, but you're willing to learn. And you show up and I don't know anything. The other corollary to that is that you haven't psyched yourself out. There's nothing that you need to do special right now other than your 10-meter target now, which is like graduating, okay? Like, think of all the people throughout history, all the people who have wings in here. you're probably gonna fit somewhere in the standard dev of all of us in here, right? So you're gonna get through more likely than not. So believe in that, believe in the ratios, in the numbers, in the historics, and so don't psych yourself out. Try to learn a little bit about yourself. Try to think what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and set yourself up and put yourself into positions to very quickly be able to identify and overcome your weaknesses, but also play to your strengths. Like, oh, I know I'm really good at this, so maybe I don't spend all the time studying here. I spend more time studying where I know I'm not really that strong, and get yourself prepared for that. So know yourself is the last one, and don't psych yourself out. And the last thing I would say is, do you do combatives?
Yes, sir.
We'd spend some time down there, because I'll tell you what, that time when, I don't know if you remember back when you were a freshman, when that bell rang for your first boxing GR, and that kind of surge of adrenaline,
Yes.
heart rate, that's the exact same feeling that you're gonna feel when you get quizzed during a check ride on a ground eval. You're gonna feel the first time you're in combat and you have to hit the pickle button and someone tells you cleared hot. It's gonna be that surge of adrenaline, fear, and over the course of what is only a second but feels like an eternity, you're gonna run through a million iterations of, did I do everything right? Do I know my stuff? Am I gonna get in trouble? Am I gonna be the one cadet that everyone talks about for the rest of the world or the rest of eternity? Or am I gonna be a hero? And if you've thought about that ahead of time and you've trained to that and understand what your body's response is and how to keep your stress and anxiety levels down and recover and manage that stressful situation, then you're gonna win. So that's it.
Thank you, sir.
You bet, thanks.
Colonel Fallon, on behalf of the United States Air Force Academy and the National Character and Leadership Symposium, we would like to thank you for joining us today with this commemorative coin.
Great, thanks, Sherry. Thanks.
This concludes our speaker session.